Hello. Welcome to episode 80 of the Late Challenge podcast with me, Paul Cope. And for the first time in the history of the show, there's no Gareth Roberts. So after successfully conquering Ben Nevis at the weekend, apparently, I've been out of contact in the Lake District. Robbo's gone off for a well-deserved break to get some new teeth and a hair transplant in Turkey, which means for the first time I've got a new co-host, who I'm delighted to say was right there at the top of my list when we talk about co-hosts, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe you.
He's the man, the myth, the legend, the king of the Anfield Raps transfer gutter show, and the undisputed king of the Liverpool bar scene, which we're probably going to get into later on, maybe on the Patreon show. The one and only Mr. Rob Gutman. Welcome to the show.
Shh.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul.
That's what's going on.
Lovely to be here, Paul.
That's what's going on when people see this. That's what's going on in the public.
What's happening? Lovely to be here. That was quite the build-up. I very much appreciate that.
And you actually are a fan of the show, aren't you? And
I am a fan of the show. It's become a family show. Mm-hmm. In fact, my wife and my eldest boy, Danny, are religious watchers of it. And I tune in, I come in and go, "What are you watching?" I go, "Oh, those two again." All right, I'll watch it for a bit. And it's very addictive, I must say. So when Gareth phoned me up and said, "Do you want to co-host with Paul?" I said, "Too right, I do. I want a piece of that."
And doesn't even want paying?
No. Was I offered? I don't remember.
Well, he told me you were offered.
I can't remember. No, I don't want paying.
See that was a negotiation there from Rob.
Yeah. You can take something out of something.
Yeah.
The lawyer out the boy.
So, with Rob being here this week, we're gonna chat about the last of LFC's preseason friendlies. It would obviously also be a sin if we didn't talk about the world of transfers, seeing as we've got Rob here. So we're going to talk about Martin Zubimendi, as well as any other gossip, and some Rob wants an event to get involved in our middle-aged moaning shit. We're also going to pay tribute to an all-time legend of the internet who passed away last week. We'll look at some mad stories from the Daily Star, maybe. And I want to have a big chat with Rob about his life in the Liverpool pub and bar game. As you know by now, lots of that's probably going to make it onto the Patreon show. So if you want to join us over there, you can do so on a free trial, as always, if you're not already a subscriber. But before we get stuck into any of that, what I wanted to say was a big thank you for last week, for all the feedback, great comments and feedback we've had after last week's free show. As we said during the episode, talking about that sort of topic is always a challenge, and the feedback we got was overwhelmingly positive, so thank you. It wouldn't be fair to say the comments were universally positive, but as we all know, this is the internet, and if we did a show saying the sky is sometimes blue, we'd have some people shouting complaints at us. So generally speaking, it went down well overall. But given last week's show was pretty heavy for the entire free show, we're going to keep it light-hearted this week, and seeing as we've got Rob here, we're going to start off with some footy, which we had 2 pre-season games in one day.
Yeah.
And so I want to have a chat with you about pre-season generally, because, as we said before we started recording, me and Robbo were both. I mean, I haven't watched any pre-season game in full. I was away with the family in a caravan park, which we might also talk about later at the weekend. And madly had when you go somewhere these days and you don't have reception.
Yeah.
There was the only Wi-Fi on the whole park was in the main bit. So as soon as you went away from the main bit to your caravan, there was no Wi-Fi, and there was no and you're like, how are we in a part of England where there's no reception? So us and the kids all had to sort of acclimatise to, oh shit, I couldn't even check the scores. I had to wait for certain points of the day where you'd go down to the shop.
Did you try and tell yourselves for a bit that that's brilliant and it's great and how it should be and how I remember this, and then just feel a sense of loss and 100%. Displacement? Yeah.
The first night we were like, this will be really good for the kids and blah, blah, blah. By the second night we were like, wish we had Wi-Fi in the caravan.
Yeah, it's just not civilized, is it? I just don't know. God bless him, but Elon Musk said something about us all effectively becoming cyborgs because we are part, our phones are all but part of who we are, our being. And that is very true, I think, whether it's a metaphor or it doesn't mean it literally, I don't think, but it is true. I was having a night out at a bar with a friend of ours, Neil, in Edinburgh a few months ago, and we'd done pub number 11 or whatever it was, and it was 11 at night, and we were slumped at a bar, and we were chatting away, and I said, "Where's my phone?" And it was Steve and Neil, and they looked at me and said, I don't know. I went, where's my bloody phone? And then Neil just had this moment where he got up off his chair. He disappeared out the pub for about 10 minutes and came back with holding my phone. He'd remembered me putting it down at a bar drunkenly 2 pubs earlier. But it was the longest 10 minutes of my recent life. The sense of loss of without a phone. I mean, Wi-Fi is the same thing, losing. I don't know how you cope. How did you cope?
It was weird. It was really weird. But it's something. I mean, this is not one for today's show. But we talk a bit about mental health stuff, as you might have seen, like popping out of the show. And so something I've been doing lately is like playing around with, because I've mainly given up boozing, which is a big deal. But like last week, I'd given up sugar for a week, so I did a full week without sugar, because it's playing around with the different addictions in our lives that cause us shit without us realizing.
Yeah.
So at first you're a bit like, what's going? But the bit that's always interesting when you give something up, I've noticed, is you start to notice how often you're looking for it.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? When you can't, like, all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm reaching for my phone like every 30 seconds here. So that in itself is an interesting thing. And then once you put it up, I think that despite the joking about with the kids and stuff, you do acclimatize pretty quickly.
Do you?
Yeah, and it was interesting with the kids. I do want to chat about the footy, but it was something dead interesting with the kids, because we were in a place where there were other kids. The kids very quickly reverted to what it was like when we were growing up. Do you know the stuff that all us middle-aged people like bemoan now? Like there's no kids knocking for each other and playing out on the grass and going to the park and stuff like that we used to do, because they're all just sitting in their own houses playing on the computers. They quickly did that.
Shall I tell you something interesting, though? I've recently dawned on me. They're better equipped at being without their phones for a while than grown-ups are. And the reason is school rules. And now yours are a bit younger, but one of them will be in school and one won't, right?
Yeah, so one's in proper school and one's in like...
Right.
Coming in.
Either way, there will be big chunks of their day where they're not allowed to have phones, right?
Yeah.
We don't have that. My 15-year-old, he, the minute he's home from school, his phone is glued to his hand, right? Or in his pocket constantly. But, 9 to 5 or 8 till 4, they're not allowed phones. Okay, they sneak them, but they don't. But mainly in a lesson, you're not on your phone. So they're used to big chunks of their days without phones.
That's a really good point.
They're more able to deal with it. You wouldn't know, because the minute
because when you see them, they've got it constantly.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I'm not even sure that I do go on my phone a lot. It's more that I need to know it's there. It's a comfort blanket as much.
Do you find yourself doing that? Because where do you keep it? Front pocket?
In my pocket, yeah.
Do you find yourself doing it? Because
I need to feel it's
you
it's
put your hand down and just touch.
It's girth and bulk in my pocket.
And I bet you most grown-ups do that, who keep it, like men who keep it in their pocket. You just touch it. It's that moment where, like that moment you're saying about, that will have started with you putting your hand on your pocket subconsciously and it not being there. Yep. And then you suddenly going, where the fuck is my phone?
Yeah, it is.
It's frightening that though, isn't it?
It is, I suppose. Although you can beat yourself up over it being frightening. You just go, well, it is what it frigging well is. I mean, I grew up in an era where people were still, I wouldn't say they were in awe of or in shock about such a concept as a television, but there was still an idea that don't watch too much TV, you'll get square eyes. There was a danger lurking in that box. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that horse is so bolted now. I mean, the TV is in our hand now,
There is an element of this. I do like to come back to this, which is every generation has this.
Yeah.
Every generation has a version of this, don't they?
I think within some classes at some point in history, reading, in fact, I think you can go back to even sort of like some communities, he's got his head in a book all day long, it's no good for him or her. They need to be outside getting fresh air. So even something we now would see as totally purely virtuous, which is reading, could be painted in a negative way. I kind of think once genies are out of bottles, you kind of have to steer them to nice places rather than disinvent them. A bit like nuclear weapons. That bombshell. I've got nothing else to say.
Rob, we could go
We're still talking about that wormhole.
That rabbit hole. I'm just looking at. I don't usually do the comments. Robbo usually does, and we've got Robbo checking in.
Is he
from the airport at Speak?
He couldn't let it alone, could he?
And you're already being celebrated as a super sub. It's nice, isn't it?
Nice one. Hi, Gareth. So he's in Speak, is he?
Robbo's using the Late Challenge podcast YouTube account to comment on the show.
Nice. I hope they're positive comments.
Which confused me at first, yeah. Before he started throwing in shit.
Yeah.
Robbo, throw in one of those super likes and send us some money. Yeah, you've got to. I should have warned you as well. You should be careful using Elon Musk's name on the show. I
did realise as the words came out of my mouth that was a good idea.
Whenever I mention Elon Musk, I mean, it's great for the algorithm because you get people criticising any mention. There's certain people any mention of in any way sets some people off, and he's one of them.
Yes, he's people have their opinions on Elon Musk, negative and positive. I'm in the negative camp. I'm not going to lie, but the reason I'm in the negative camp is mainly because my father's obsessed with him. My dad loves him. My dad's for all the wrong right reasons. I shall explain. My dad's a very sciencey guy, so he loves all the. He likes Elon's ambition with things like space, and he's just fascinated with that sort of shit. And I kind of think it's nice, it's sweet. He doesn't ever, when I say to him, but he's been a wanker on the internet and he's got in bed with some terrible right-wing people. My dad goes, yeah, he's not very nice, is he? Yeah, but I read this book about doing some cool stuff in space. And I go, oh, for God's sake.
How old's your dad then?
82.
And that's quite like progressive thinking from an 82-year-old, being into the whole space stuff.
Yeah, God, yeah, no, he's a physics guy. He's always been into that sort of stuff. So unfortunately, I think a fairly innocent hobby and admiration has just sort of soured around him. So I can't escape the topic of Elon. So my negative associations are mainly because my mum goes, your father is boring me shitless about Elon fucking Musk. That's not her language. I must stress she's an 82-year-old lady and she doesn't talk like that. But that's the gist of what she's getting at. She wishes Elon Musk would go out of her life forever.
He talks about him that much.
He talks about him all the time. He's like her second husband, she says. Constantly there.
Wow.
He's very, very dull on the subject. In fact, there's a danger that this gets out and someone will show him, Dad, you're not dull, but Elon Musk, Mum doesn't like him.
I love that. Look, there's no cool segue back to it, smooth segue back to the footy topic. But
go on,
I do want to talk about footy with you while I've got you here. Partly because if we do talk more about Elon Musk, I'll be dealing with seeing as I'll be dealing with the comments this week. That's all I'll be dealing with, and I can't be arsed.
No.
So come on, footy pre-season. What you messaged me before saying you've got different views on pre-season than you've heard us say.
Yeah, and I think you're not just you guys. I think there's a mainstream view amongst I don't know the sort of lads I think similarly to about football and a variety of similar ages to, which is CBA with pre-season games. Wake me up when the real action starts. And you and Gareth sort of said that in a roundabout way, and you're not alone. I'm sort of in a bit of a minority. I mean, in a minority in my own house, in a sense, in that my Danny is 25. He just doesn't want. He's almost officially boycotting pre-season. Although I did convince him to come and watch the Liverpool game against Sevilla yesterday at Anfield. It was big of him to come along and watch it. But so I'm in a sort of a minority here. But I loved the pre-season because I feel a sense of loss when the football goes at the end of a season. And when it returns, in however diluted a form, it's whetting appetite. And I can always find a motivation. I think in the bit I listened to you and Gareth are doing, you're going, there's not even like this pre-season, there's a new signing to enjoy. But there is a new manager. So I was watching the early games, and I've watched them all, and you're just looking for clues as to how it's going to be. So you just have to be a weird obsessive, but you find your motivation. So I've always said the best game of any given season is the first game of the season. To me, that's like Christmas Day. I build up such anticipation for that. So all the rest of it is almost like the Christmas specials ahead of Christmas Day. Do you know what I mean? They're just whetting the appetite for the big event.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, well, tell us about Saturday then, because I've only watched highlights of all preseason games, and I wasn't even. It's funny how much I've disengaged. Is that I didn't even know until the day, and it was Joe talking about the intermittent signal thing. like it was only during the day on Saturday I knew there were two. I knew we had two preseason games left, but I didn't realise they were both on the same day. So I was like, oh, and because I'm dealing with kids and all that, I didn't even have time to look at the teams and stuff. Because I was thinking, oh, well, he's probably done a first team and a B team, so we can get ready for the first game. And then I looked at the teams earlier on, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure that's the case. But then obviously, it's
you sort of did that, yeah.
Yeah, but it's too. I think it's dangerous to read too much into it, because obviously a big thing they're all dealing with, not just him this year, is people come back at different times. So he's got lads who may well be in his first 11 that didn't play in the Sevilla game because they've only been back a week or whatever. So what did you make of it? What was the game like? What was the ground like? And what do you think of the team? What do you think his team's going to be?
Let's get the ground out of the way. So it I don't know what the final attendance was, but it looked pretty darn full. And I think that's good for it, considering how big our ground was. It's 62,000 capacity, like it's about 58,000.
It was 59 something I saw
was
earlier.
It? Right. Well, it felt as near as damn it full. It was a real rousing rendition of "You'll Never Walk Alone" at the beginning. I think there was a sense of we need to put a show on for the new man. Yeah. And I felt that was going on.
He got a song as well, didn't he? He did.
Yeah,
they did the clock.
There was a bit of a trying to sing that, which I thought was a bit cheesy.
Was it not
inappropriate? I thought. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be a killjoy over that sort of thing, but it's fine. I think Jurgen Klopp would have had something to say. I think. So what I've quite enjoyed of early Arne Slot is when he's asked questions about the crowd and what a big club this is, he doesn't want to be rude and go, and fucking what? I've got a job to do here. Don't give me the background noise. He is quietly, he's been quite cool about it in a way I'm respecting thus far. Like, he doesn't want to talk about it. I think he's in for a bit of a rude awakening in a positive way when he hears our crowd at full force, and it's, urging us on to a victory. No, nothing you can hear about it really prepares you for it. I think Klopp came to realise it to the extent that by his last 2 years, you could tell he was giving the crowd pep talks, wasn't he, in his press conferences?
100%.
He realised that you have to harness the power of the crowd. The most obvious example, I think, in modern times was that time Mikel Arteta inadvertently whipped us all up into a frenzy by starting a touchline fight with Klopp or one of the coaches. Do you remember that? Was it a Boxing Day game against Arsenal, and it was just trundling along at about 0-0, and then he just lit the blue touch paper by just winding our crowd up.
Yeah, the worst thing you could ever do.
Yeah, and it reminded me of that adage about that Shankly got this. People always revert to Bill as a sort of revert to authority kind of thing. But he legendarily told Tommy Smith, if the crowd weren't quiet, just to go through the back of someone and it would just spark everything off.
Yeah.
So I think understanding how you need to light the blue touch paper with the crowd is important.
Do you think, though, I've only just thought of this, and people, it's easy to forget, isn't it, the start of Klopp's tenure, because everyone always remembers the same sound bite, because it's like that. Have you ever seen the interview with Kenny Dalglish once? This is years ago on Sky, and they showed him like a show reel of goals. And when it came back to the studio, they went to him, "Do you remember all those goals, Kenny?" And he laughed and went, "Yeah, they're the ones everyone always shows." So of course I remember them. But yeah. It's a bit like that. It's like everyone remembers the bits about Klopp that they always show the clips of. So the famous lines and all of that. But as you just said that about Arne Slot then, it reminded me, I think Klopp was very similar when he came, because every time he was asked to big up the Liverpool crowd, there was still that part of him that was, he's only just become Liverpool manager. So he's actually mainly Dortmund still. And Slot's still mainly Feyenoord.
Yeah.
So what they're still doing is going, well, your crowd might be great, yeah, but Dortmund's boss as well. And Slot keeps doing that. Yeah, your crowd might be great, but Feyenoord's boss as well, And it takes time for them to go, as you say, it takes time for them to go, yeah, fucking hell. Yeah, Feyenoord was good, but this is the shit. And I think that's where Klopp got to, wasn't it? Which is, Dortmund was brilliant, but Jesus Christ, now I've tasted this.
100% that. I totally agree with that observation. I've noticed that he never doesn't mention Feyenoord if they ask him about the Liverpool crowd. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to be authentic, right, and you're going to project that you believe that you are with the people, we're all in this together, you can't just walk out on us the next day. Like, imagine he did get the job with the German national team next month, Klopp or whatever. and the media started going, oh, the crowd were really behind you, Jurgen. Have you ever heard a crowd like that? He's going to feel really dirty and disloyal to suddenly not go, it was good, but, you know, it was also really good at Liverpool and Dortmund. So I do think you're right. I think it's a dignified and intelligent subconscious analysis, even if it isn't subconscious, it's a dignified and intelligent analysis by Slot, and I do like that. Also, I like the fact that he doesn't want to get over and carried. I think he doesn't want the media to allow him to get distracted with it all being a lovely party, and shouldn't we all be grateful to be here? Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think he wants to. He's got to come across as a leader to his players, as a man they're inspired and in awe of. Not a guy who's there busy with big doe eyes looking at the wonderful red sea around him, you know? It's just not, cool.
I think that's a really good point that, like, and I think this is where, if you think of someone like Moyes at United, I think that's where someone like him goes wrong. Yeah. I saw Ferdinand saying this weeks ago, is that Moyes went to Ferdinand on like a pre-season tour. When he saw like the crowds and all that, like he went to Ferdinand, God, it's a big club, this, isn't it? And you're like, in that moment, Ferdinand must be thinking, oh, fucking hell, mate. Yeah. Like, no, you're meant to be the one saying to us, yeah, I'm not arsed about any of this. I'm just going to win us trophies. So when you look like you're overawed by it all, you lose something. And I think you're right, Slot. I think Slot's handled that really, really well because it is tricky to not upset the new club whilst maintaining your integrity and maintaining that status of, no, I'm not here to dick around. I'm here to win stuff. And
it's a difficult balancing act, isn't it, as well? Because the most obvious example of someone who did the opposite and went in the direction that we're acclaiming Slot and Clough for going into, but went too far the other way, I think is probably Clough at Leeds, legendarily in '74, where he takes over from Don Revie. It's one for the kids, obviously. He takes over from Don Revie, a title-winning Leeds team full of winners who had nothing to prove. And obviously he'd said to himself in his own head, you can't be overawed or act like you're impressed, as they'll have you for dinner, these elite pros. So he came in and just did the opposite and went, you think you're good, you're shit, you've won unfairly, you cheated, you're a dirty team, I'm going to teach you how to play football. Yeah. Which is exactly taking the maxim we've just been praising, but just taking it that 40-50% too far. Yeah. But it just, my point is it's a difficult balancing act psychologically. You can't look like you're in awe, but you can't not show respect, you know? Yeah. And getting that right is possibly where success or failure lies.
Yeah, but it's funny, isn't it? Because I know it, like, Robert was underwhelmed by the first signs of Slot, and many people were, the first press conference, and we talked about it, and we said, well, there was nothing special in it, was there? And we discussed it, and we, as always, you get some stick for this stuff, like what you expect and all that. But there was the bit at the end of it where, you know, the interviewer said to him, "You got a message for the fans," and it looked like they just sprung that on him. And you're like, come on, for me that was a criticism of the club, not of him. It's like, if you're going to ask him to do that, give him a week's notice so he can write something, or at least think of it in advance. And so that all came across a bit fudged. But I actually think I've actually been really impressed by him. Because I think everyone has accepted the fact you're not going to get another Klopp. And I think his personality type and the way he's come across has been ideal for taking over from such a big personality. Because he's just been very steady, very straight battered, but also quietly confident. Not saying, very praising Klopp and saying he's left me a great squad. But at the same time, no, even if he hasn't outright said it, he may have outright said it, but at least strongly hinted at the fact that I can improve this. The stuff I can do here. And I think, I'm not sure pre-season could have gone better for him, could it? If you think back to the first behind closed doors game against Preston, there were already people losing their minds. Yeah. As they're always going to be on the internet. But I think most people are like, who cares? It's, this is just the start. But the main games we've had, the way they've gone, you're like, I can't imagine it could have gone much better. I was listening to a bit of his press conference today, and he got asked that question. And he basically said, well, it could have gone better. I could have had all my players. Yeah. But that's out of his hands. With what he's had to play with, I think, could he have had a better start, like, up to this point?
Well, let's do it two ways. it's results what count, and in a sense, even in pre-season, if the thing about pre-season, if they go against you, you can say it doesn't matter, they don't count, and we've won the league. I think we had a terrible pre-season the year we won the league.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But he's in a position where everything's up for judgment at the moment, and I think in his public pronunciations, he's been word perfect. Really, he's been mistake free. He's focused on straight batting. Really, quite Kenny peak Dalglish manager like. I think when he was first in the job. I think he said to himself, I'm not going to give them any lines, any showbiz. I'm not a Mourinho or a Klopp. I'm not that kind of guy. What they're not going to do is hang me out to dry. They're not going to get a hint of anything I've said is a criticism of Klopp, or that I'm giving it the big one, or that I'm having a pop at any past regime, or he's just straight battered it. It's almost media training perfect, and I mean that in the best possible sense. And then, as you say, the results themselves, no, you couldn't really ask for much more. The other thing is it's quickly passed over, but when you saw those pre-season fixtures laid out, the Man United and the Arsenal ones being the main fixtures, across the other side of the world with half a squad, and let's face it, it is half a squad, because the lads who joined after that tour, you could have picked 8 or 9 who would have been starters for a majority of games last season, or 7 or 8 at least. Who was it? Let me just go through. You go the keeper, Van Dijk, Alisson, Robertson, so what? Konate. That's Trent. Sorry, that's the entire back 5. Were not available on that tour. I mean, Robertson was semi-training, but he wasn't available. There was a few midfielders there, but McAllister, first midfield name on the team sheet, wasn't there. Salah was there, okay, but not Diaz and Nunes, who played most games alongside him. Not Gakpo, not Jota till the very end. So, and there he was out there playing Arsenal and United, 2 of the biggest names he could have faced pre-season. Could easily have just sort of posted a cheeky 4-0 defeat there, against one of them. And it would have all been a bit, it's only pre-season, but, you worry if he's taken on some of the defensive frailties under Klopp and he hasn't made them any better. There'd have been lots of narrative, wouldn't there? So the results speak for themselves so far. Of course, it's all going to, with the first few league games going to be magnified like anything. I don't envy him that. Win one, brilliant, lose one, terrible.
What did you? That's 100%. I remember saying that at the start of last season, and as we go, it's funny how footy quickly changes, because as we were going into the season, we said on these shows the wheels could fall off this season really quickly if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And Klopp could be in danger if that happens. And it went the other way, and all of a sudden we're talking about quadruple. But it's like with any new project, that the same could happen here, couldn't it? And that's why I'm pleased he's had a good pre-season, even though, as you say, you can take it either way no matter what happens. What did you make of the team on Saturday and the performance and the way you were playing? Because did you see him in pre-season? All the analysis before he came in was that he plays 4-2-3-1. And then in a press conference, someone said that to him, and he said, I don't play 4-2-3-1. Who's doing the analysis of my team?
Yeah. Chris Pajak asked him. I felt sorry for Chris because he got a bit of stick ridiculously because Slot sort of very light-heartedly said, "Who told you that?" As you just said.
Yeah.
But it was actually the best question of the day by Chris, because it was a proper tactical question rather than. So I think some of the sort of the easier ones to fend for him. It made him stop and think. I thought it was a really great question. And also, it's one that everybody had bought into. Every single thing you read about him said, no, he tends to be a 4-2-3-1 man. And he went, well, I don't see it like that at all.
But isn't that what we're seeing in pre-season? What are you seeing? Because and look, this is coming from me just actually not watching too much of it. But everyone's talking about there being a double pivot.
Yes.
So what shape are you seeing when you're watching it?
Well, this buys into the idea of there's a lot of bullshit and pseudo sophistication around football tactics. Because 4-3-3 can line up. Let's look at the midfield 3 at the risk of getting dull about this. But it's a triangle, normally, is the way people think of it. In fact, it has to be, doesn't it? Which just depends which way up the triangle is. Now, he sees it's 4-3-3 with a 2 base triangle and one at the point of the triangle. Was the Klopp triangle, typically, we thought of it as Fabinho at the bottom and Henderson and Wijnaldum, say, higher up.
Yeah.
But then very often, Henderson was very parallel to Fabinho. You know, when Trent went forward, Henderson would sort of come over to the right and cover.
Yeah.
So it depends what you're seeing. A lot of the time I'm seeing something which reminds me of the more sophisticated iterations of 4-4-2 in the, God, going back even to like the great Dalglish era with Barnes and Beardsley, or even peak Wenger. Because Salah's playing as in a wide right position when everyone was talking about him playing more centrally because of his loss of pace, and maybe that would suit him better. He's been committed to him playing wide right in every single game. But never really as a winger who's asked to do the wingery things we're used to peak Mo Salah doing. To me, he's a bit more of a right-sided midfield player, a right-sided number 10, maybe a bit like the mature era Robert Pires at Arsenal. And the double pivots maybe a bit more Vieira Petit. Do you remember at Arsenal? One stays, one goes, you know?
Yeah.
And the other side, well, he's played because of lack of options. He's played until yesterday, Carvalho. Now, Carvalho doesn't want to play wide, so he's had him playing as quite a tucked-in wide man, tasked with running in behind. A bit like Freddie Ljungberg, if we're going to keep mine, and us, or Ray Houghton. But those are the two teams I've got in mind, which it reminded me of.
Yeah.
Harvey Elliott's played as very much as a 10. Well, Harvey Elliott didn't play yesterday in the first game. Okay, going on to yesterday, I think it was as close to the starting team against Ipswich as he could get to, given the information he had before him yesterday. And interesting what he said at the end of it was, I could see which of the lads who've come back late look ready for the first game, and some I could see which ones weren't. Okay. And I think we all could. So, of the ones who he took a bit of a chance on, because they'd literally only been back at the academy, at the AXA for a few days, start from front to back. Luis Diaz had only just returned on the Monday, Tuesday to training. McAllister had, and at the back, Van Dijk, Trent and Alisson. So that's 5 players. Of those 5, who you'd pick against Ipswich based on yesterday, the keeper, because it's not really a fitness issue, Van Dijk, because he tends to coast through games, and Luis Diaz, who was spectacular and scored 2 good goals, and one of which was sensational. But there'd be big question marks on McAllister, who looked very rusty, and Trent, who definitely can do much better, although he did several good things. So I would say we'll see 9 out of yesterday's starting 11 starts. Who the other 2 are, I don't know. In the second game, the one who shone the most, although it was full of first-team players like Nunes and Gakpo and Curtis Jones, Harvey Elliott stood out by a mile. He was sensational.
Really?
And he's been, on balance, the player of pre-season for me, Harvey Elliott.
Okay.
Going
back to what you were saying before, playing in the tip of that diamond in midfield.
I mean, I call it a free roll. You know, it's a 10. He sort of goes where he likes.
Yeah.
But given that license, his creativity is at another level. I mean, he's just dinking balls over the top in tightly. He looks like he could unpick locks, in really tight games.
Yeah, but that role's tailor-made for him, isn't it? When you think about it, because I think the problem with him has always been, whenever he gets played in the forward line, he just doesn't have the pace to play there.
Yeah.
And then if you play him in like a classic Klopp, wide of the 3 in the middle, he's got the engine, but again, he doesn't have much pace. And that is still important in the middle of the pitch. Whereas playing at the point of that triangle, not diamond, with a free roll, I can imagine if you asked him where does he want to play, I would imagine that's actually most creative players' dream, isn't it? To play in that position.
I think the only question mark is he's the one who got the nod on it yesterday, if I'm right. I think, yes, it was because he played as in the pivots. He played McAllister and Gravenberch. Now, Gravenberch again excelled. It was the second time he's tried Gravenberch as the 6. He was the deepest player in that midfield, and he was good. He was good. Really good. Tip of the, let's call it of the diamond, tip of the triangle was Dom Soboslai, who was in and out the game, who was devastatingly good when he was in it, but seemed missing in parts, I would say. And I'm a massive fan of his. But
that sums up his first season, don't you think?
It does, in a way. He did have a lot of injuries in the second part, which I think people have overlooked. I think he's an incredible talent. But if it's him versus Elliott, I think he got the nod over Elliott yesterday because of his physicality. I think if you put him... The thing about when you're playing that 3, we can go it's a pivot and one ahead, but there's times when you're defending right? And they've all got to get behind the ball. And they become not just a double pivot in midfield, almost like a treble pivot in midfield. Do you know what I mean? Not treble pivot, a screen of three alongside each other. Szoboszlai, with his physical presence, his stature, and the fact that he's also played in the six, you can sort of drop him in from his attacking position into a defensive one. I think it's harder to do that with Harvey. So I can see it being a horses for courses thing. So you're playing one of the bottom 6 or 7 at home and you need to unpick locks. Maybe you go with Harvey. You're playing Arsenal away. You may be going, I want another a body who can do a bit more going the other way. You pick Dom. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and it's funny this, isn't it? Because we used to see this a lot with Klopp, that there is always that element, and it always makes me laugh about Pep Guardiola. This, when Pep first came into the league, and it's like he won't compromise on his principles and blah 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 blah, and then all these years later, he's winning trebles by playing 4 centre backs
and a yard dog up front.
Yeah,
he doesn't play football, just kicks it in the net.
Yeah, and by the way, is massive.
Yeah,
this is something that I think just no one talks about enough. The Guardiola's come into this league and he has changed because he's gone. I need more physicality. I need big lads. And that was something Klopp did over the years. He was like, my team needs to be big. So that year when we bought Carvalho and Elliott in the same transfer window, I think everybody was like, these are Pep Linder's signings. Because Klopp teams are units most of the time. Because he buys into the idea that, well, if you can be fast, skillful and massive, that's sound, isn't it? I know we like talking about footy together and stuff like that. And because I think lots of those of us, you like to boil things down to basics. And I do want to talk about transfers while we've got time. It's like you can make football really complicated, and we often do in this day and age. But the reality is, if your players are bigger than everybody else's players, that's an advantage.
It absolutely is. There's no doubt about it. I remember the great Houllier team of 2001. It was full of very, very tall lads, quietly. I'm trying to think, even the skillful ones like Jari Litmanen in the squad were big units. Okay, there's the odd tiddlers like Owen and Fowler who could stick in the back of the net. There's a lot of tall lads in that team. Yeah. Even flair players like Patrick Berger had a bit of height about them. In fact, I remember it was Alex Ferguson commented on it. I think he said the team they're building at Liverpool reminds me of the first title winning team I built at United. And he was talking about that team which had Bruce in it and Pallister and Mark Hughes and just big lads in the middle, big guys, all over the park. Yeah, it always is. At the end of the day, they take up more room on the pitch. Do you know what I mean? When people talk about, he's a diminutive number 6, but he's a terrier, you go, he may well be, but look how much space Rodri takes up. Look how much space Fabinho took up. There's a lot of getting round the other side of a man like that a big physical specimen.
Yeah.
It's not everything.
Well, I've said for a long time, everybody at some point should go and watch a game of professional football from the front row of the ground, so you can see the game at this eye level that they're playing at. Yeah, and when when you're high up in the main stand and you're shouting at the passes you can see that they're not pulling off. When you can see their viewpoint and there's 5'6'4" lads in your way. Yeah, that makes a difference. Yeah, it just physically, it just does.
There's no accident that Virgil van Dijk's the best defender I think any of us have ever seen. He's a physical specimen.
He's massive, yeah. He's massive and he's fast.
You just get the impression when you're watching, especially if you're at the... I think TV is always a bit deceptive. Not so you can't tell people's statures and physicality on telly, but there's something about in the flesh when you can see it. You can just see how much space they occupy, and you go, yeah. And then there's a couple of little guys and Virgil, and you go, yeah, it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch.
Yeah. Absolutely. As always, we're running out of time. It won't surprise you at all. We've done 40 already. Wow. And it won't surprise you to know that we've carried on even without Robbo being here. Admin is not our strongest point on the show, and we cocked up. We've started recording early because we cocked up between us availability for recording. So the show is going to be slightly shorter than usual. I just want to. Robbo came back to us before when I said throw in someone. He's saying I'm skint-lid. But Lee Murphy, I want to say thank you to you. He's thrown in some a super chat or a super like, whatever they're called, saying big welcome to the award-winning gutter god Gottman.
Gottman?
Yeah.
Gottman. One U, one T, two N's. But I'll take the compliment. Tell him thank you very much.
He's gone close. It's the thought.
It's good. It'll do for me.
It's the thought that counts, isn't it?
It'll do for me. It'll do for me.
let's have a chat. We've got about 10 minutes on this show, and then we'll fly over to the Patreon. So we might carry on this on the Patreon anyway, because we've just talked about players, and so I wanted to talk about transfers while we've got you here. And you said to me, well, the two things you mentioned that you want to talk about. So and you can pick which order you want to go through them. You want to have events about people saying they're not asked about transfers, and you mentioned your general transfer philosophy.
I think the two. I meant the two as the same thing, really.
Go on.
Well, yeah, it's again. It sort of plays into the theme of we talked about again about people being dismissive about pre-season as if they're above it, right? And and when the people I'm criticising are my best friends here, by the way, who will, broadly speaking, who think they're above pre-season. Most people who consider themselves thinking people on the game feel it's a bit of a, and hence, ironically, when we started the transfer show on the Anfield Wrap, we called it, they came up with the name without consulting me, by the way, Gutman in the gutter, right? Yeah. Because talking about transfers is the stuff of the back page of tabloids. It's gutter press. That was the joke supposedly, and they made a pun on my name, which was really sweet. But I live with it now. Yeah. But what it plays into, I mean, and you'll find the better football journalists when they're on their social media platforms, on Twitter or whatever, will always be sort of all but eye rolling about having to talk about transfers. Like when it comes to the end of the window, they'll go, sad that's over, not, or some, there'll always be some salty comment about the transfer windows. Oh, this transfer madness. People are so insane about it. Why can't they just concentrate, and fellow fans we know will always go, look, I'm just interested in the red shirts that turn up on the first day of the season and I'll support them. I don't want to hear all this rumour and nonsense, right? So I'm just creating the picture around me.
Yeah, go for it.
I've never, ever thought like that. And I could spend a long time probably analysing why. But I think definitely for my generation, the closed season was a difficult place. Now, almost football, although we talked about, you do get, I feel I get starved of football once the real football stops. And there's a gap until it starts again in August. In truth, the internet never sleeps. So there's always something to talk about and going on through the summer. But back in, say, when I was growing up as a football watching fan in the late 70s, early 80s, once the football season stopped, the media stopped broadly being interested in football at all. There was nothing on the TV. The tabloids would occasionally run a transfer story on the back pages. And that's all you had to cling on to. Mm-hmm. So that fueled my interest and love for it because it was giving me some of my fill of football-related stuff in the barren months. Yeah. But the other thing that I always noticed is I grew up in an era where there were no transfer windows. So transfers were possible at any stage in the season. I don't know when the windows came in the early 90s or something. But before then, you could have a bad result. And I noticed often, whether the tabloids were just humouring us or whatever, within a day or two, they'd go, look, we could have a bad result and we'd have the midfield would look shit, say, in the post-Souness season. I remember something like that. And then we'd be linked to a new midfielder and you go, oh, that's got me interested. That's got me happy again. It's the prospect of change. That's what transfers do. This is the philosophy of it. Mm-hmm. There's always a better tomorrow with a transfer. Someone says they're bringing in a new player. Well, anything's possible. You don't know how good he's going to be. If you're dissatisfied in the moment, the transfer brings forward the possibility of better days. Mm. My other thing, which I've got a problem with those who don't like the transfer, is I think, well, if you're not interested in the gossip around what brought Mo Salah to Liverpool, for example, right? I said once upon a time, Mo Salah was a bit of gossip on the internet, where a few fellas on a Roma website might have said there's interest in our player from Liverpool, and people sneered at maybe just being agent talk or something. So if you celebrate all Salah's goals and his contributions, remember once upon a time he was a baby amoeba rumour. For Liverpool. Yeah. All great players were once rumours. Yeah. And if you want to enjoy the journey, that's part of the journey for me. Will they, won't they come? Who is this guy? I mean, we were talking beforehand, Liverpool are living in this sort of limbo at the moment over whether Martin Zubimendi will come from Spain. Mm-hmm. Not a huge amount of us knew much about Martin Zubimendi well before the Euros for certain. Now, a lot of us who care know a hell of a lot about Martin Zubimendi, his hopes and dreams, his childhood, everything like that now.
Yeah.
But so what? It's good. It's part of we can imagine, as I said, even better tomorrows.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. It's funny. I was saying to Rob before we started recording that the thing that made me laugh most about Zubimendi was when Rodri went off at half time in the Euros final, and even the TV pundits were all like creaming themselves, going, "Oh, Rodri's gone off," and it just sums up how little we know about footballers still, and in a world when everybody thinks they know everybody because footy's on TV all the time, that they brought on this lad called Zubimendi, and everyone's like, well, that's obviously without us even knowing who he is. And think about the arrogance in that. Without us even knowing who he is, he's clearly a clear downgrade in Rodri in that game. But now, as you say, we've seen a bit about him, we've heard more about him. It was like, no, he's just another phenomenal centre midfielder they were bringing on. And because now when you look at him and you see his background, you're like, yeah, if we got him and put him in our team, he's going to be an upgrade. And I think that's a big thing, actually, because I can fall into the same thing about being a killjoy about transfer rumours and stuff like that. More so because I can't be arsed with all the ones that don't come through. Do you know?
It's a frustrating business to be in, to enjoy.
Because on your analogy about every Mo Salah was an amoeba one day on the thing on the internet grapevine. It's like, yeah, well, but for every Mo Salah, you had to go through 1,000.
Oh, you did. You have to sift.
Yeah, you could come up with better examples than I kind of to finish that story. But the Zubimendi thing is I think the most interesting point about this is that the last point of the reality is there is no other way of dramatically improving this team for our excitement for the future than to buy a player like Zubimendi. Because if we buy Zubimendi, whether or not he turns out to be great, it's a bit like when we wanted Caicedo. We were chatting about it before we started recording, and Chelsea bought him. Your assumption is he is already a great footballer, and if you put him in our team, he's better than some of the players we've got. So for all that Ryan Gravenberch has had a good pre-season, we would all say, I think, we would expect Zubimendi to be a massive upgrade on him in that position, which means we're automatically leaping our team forward. So you take away the thing that the coaches all love, which is I'll coach my players to be better. It's like, yeah, but that takes time, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We could coach, maybe Ryan Gravenberch can be Zubimendi in 2 years, but he's not going to be in 2 weeks. And I think that's the key, isn't it? Probably.
It's a real tough, it's obviously a tough business improving a good squad. And what's come out...
Well, Slot said that, hasn't he?
Yeah, it's come out from when Richard Hughes spoke about it, Slot has spoken about it, that this squad is great. If you're going to be harsh, you may say it perhaps doesn't have the depth of gold dust that it might have had at the peak of the Klopp era. It's probably got a real good base of 20 lads who are at least 7 out of 10, 7.5 out of 10, but maybe not quite enough 9 out of 10s. It's so there's room for improvement, but it's tough. It is tough to improve. Harvey Elliott's really good. Curtis Jones is really good. Gravenberch's a really, really good player. And they're young, and they may be on the cusp of becoming great players even within the next 3 years. We don't know. So you've got to be darn sure. Liverpool have always had this philosophy that under FSG, really, and I think under the sort of background transfer committee people we've had, that it's better to do no business than do the wrong business. I think that sometimes they've been a bit too risk averse in that sense, and Klopp hinted at it in his last year or so. But Zubimendi, if you're looking for a profile of what's going to improve us, if you just go back and Google best defensive midfielders in Europe, which I did the other day, and these are all articles that you'll see from February this year, March, April, May this year. He's in most pundits' top 10 in Europe. Well, the world, actually. And in that 10, you can probably rule out in most of those lists 3 where they shouldn't have had the players in because they weren't central defensive midfielders. Like you'll see Guimaraes in some of them from Newcastle. Yeah, he's not a DM. He's not a 6. So he's pretty high up. It's an example of exactly who Liverpool should be going. Now, they might not get him. I think given that the quality in the squad, I don't think we should necessarily cry big tears or think we should then rush out and get somebody else. I think they probably should be patient. And I find it myself difficult saying that because I love seeing business done for its own sake at times. One of the benefits of bringing in a player like Zubimendi is he may or may not be a sure thing. I think in percentage terms, he's likelier to be a sure thing than if you pick a kid from Salzburg, say, who's 22, looks like he's emerging, but you don't know if he's going to do it. But what Zubimendi would do immediately, increase the competition for places and focus the minds of those who thought they might get a job in the 6 role. The Curtis Joneses, the Gravenbergs, McAllisters. You'll focus their minds, because they'll be saying to themselves, he's coming in for how much? 50 odd million on a release clause. Means he's probably worth 75 million. He hasn't come here to mow the grass. He's come in to get a first, to take one of only 3 spots in this team.
Yeah.
He's going to get first dibs here, the motherfucker, right?
Yeah.
So we've got to up our game. It might be that bringing in Zubimendi means that Gravenberg has the season of his life. That's the win-win. Zubimendi may have a very, even if he comes in, people forget Rodri's first season. He was shit.
Yeah.
He was youngish and a bit crap. It took him a year to adjust. It's quite hard, I think, to hit the ground running, but we need the extra body. I'm a big believer in transfers in the blunderbuss approach sometimes, which is, do you know what? If you need a central midfielder, bring in 3, because one of them will be good.
Well, we've run out of time, but you go back to one of my obsessions that some people get annoyed with, but which is Alex Ferguson and Man United and his era, because they haunted me so much. But I'll always remember when we bought Aquilani and we bought one guy, and they bought Hargreaves, Carrick, and Anderson, all for the same amount of money, because Ferguson knew what you were saying. He was like, one of those 3 will work out, definitely. I can guarantee one of those 3 will work out. And Michael Carrick ended up being a great centre midfielder for them. Anderson was a bit part player. Hargreaves was injury prone. We brought in Aquilani, put all our eggs in one basket, and it went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the point, isn't it? We've changed things slightly because our percentage wins as a football club have got better, but you can't always guarantee that. It's interesting. Two lads have thrown in the chat here a great example of that thing we were saying before. Vern Wright and who else said? Let me give you a shout out if I can find. Oh, Anthony Boylan. For every Mo Salah, there's a Samau. Vern Wright said, I'm still waiting on a Samau, and that's the problem with it, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but Simao was a true rumour. He was about to get on a plane, It just didn't happen. Yeah, I mean, transfers don't happen, but that's the soap opera.
But that's the joy. That's what you love
soap
about it,
opera.
isn't it? Yeah,
football's a soap opera.
Yeah, well, going back to what you said about the rap and Neil before, I was laughing because the number of times I've chatted to Neil, and he's like, because he's in that camp, and he's like, it's like, this is the impurest part of footy. And it's almost, he's like, but the fucking bastards love this. This is the bit most of the bastards love.
No, Neil is a born-again transfer man.
Is he?
I'm not going to hear a word against Neil's. Neil is, Neil loves the statistics and the forensic analysis of potential footballers. So he's found his way into the whole milieu. Bless him.
Good.
Hi, Neil, if you're listening.
Yeah. We're going to have to leave it there because we are running out of time this week. A quick reminder that we have set up a fantasy football league, and anyone can play who's watching the free show, but we're going to have £100 a month prize for the highest points each individual month, but you've got to be a Patreon subscriber for that. We've still got to sort out the admin for this. And Mingle, if you're watching, I know I still need to put my team in, which I'll get round to this week at some point. We'll also no doubt throw in some random prizes on the free game. There'll be a link below this episode on YouTube or on the podcast if you want to play. Loads of people have already entered, so it'll be something we can chat about during the season. Thank you to Rob for joining us this week and stepping in while Robbo's away sunning himself or on a plane as we record this. Thank you for joining us. As always, I haven't got time to do the plugs, so come and watch us on Patreon. You get another 50 minutes or so of Rob over there. We're going to have a chat about the bits we didn't get to talk about on here. Hopefully, because I want to talk about this is mainly for me, we'll get to talk about Rob's career transforming the Liverpool bar scene. But you'll have to come over to Patreon if you want to see that. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.